Hello! Here we are for the next lesson of this 3ds Max mini course, which is valid for the next official V-Ray workshop. In this lesson we'll find out what tools are available in 3ds Max for selecting the objects in the scene. We'll also look how to manage layers and how to create groups of objects. I've prepared a slightly more complex scene for you for this, including some geometric forms, lights and a camera. Don't worry about these for now, as we'll look at where and how to create them in the lessons to follow. For now, they're just there to look good. In this video we'll immediately start to become familiar with the toolbar we saw briefly in the first lesson. In fact, all the selection tools can be found in the highlighted area. Now, to make a selection, let's make sure that the Select Object button is active. Having done that, by clicking on an object in the scene, we select it. And if we hold down the Control key, we can click on another object and add them to the selection. If we accidentally select the wrong object, we can hold down the Alt key and click on the same object again, this time deselecting it. To cancel the selection, just click on an empty part of the viewport. .3ds Max obviously also allows selection by dragging. Normally, all objects are touched by the selection frame are captured. But if we activate the button shown, we can tell the software to only select objects totally contained with the selection frame. We can also select various types of multiple selection modes. By clicking and holding the button shown, we can enable the circular selection tool, for example. This is a very useful tool for making small precise selections of groups of small objects starting at the center. We can also use the polygonal lasso tool, which is the same as the one in Photoshop. The only difference is that we need to click on the first point and drag until the second point is activated by releasing the left mouse button. We then click normally for all the other points of the selections. The next tool, just like in Photoshop, is a lasso tool. I'm guessing you've all seen it before. The last on the list is a kind of brush stroke selection. By moving over the scene using this brush, objects are selected when touched. Obviously, if you have window crossing active and the object is too large for the brush, the object won't be selected. So, by deactivating these options, you'll see that any object touched by the brush will be selected. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the lesson, I imported the scene because it contains various kinds of objects, including lights and a camera. A fundamental tool for speeding up the production process is the selection filter. This filter allows you to select categories of objects and exclude items that don't belong to this category. To finish off the lesson on selections, let's select an object and go to the Modify tab in the Command panel. You'll see that in the highest row of the tab, a name has been assigned to the object. This also goes for other objects. When we create an object, Max always gives it a name by default, but it's always good practice to assign our own names to the things we create, like this box for example, which I will now rename. This little piece of advice is also useful in introducing the last selection tool, Selection by Name. As you can see, a dialog box opens containing a set of tools that can all be used to filter objects by name. We obviously won't go into all the available tools in deep, but for the moment let's look at the most useful and immediate ones. You may intuitively gather that by selecting one of the items in the list and clicking OK, it will be selected. You may also gather that by entering the name of an object in the Find field and clicking OK, you get the same result. What makes this panel very useful, however, is the possibility of filtering object by category, to thin out really long lists of objects in very complex scenes. As you'll see, if we deactivate the individual categories in the filtering tool one at a time, the list gets shorter. Here, all the main categories have been deactivated. Yet, the chair is still in the list. No fear, there's no error. This was done on purpose to present to you the next topic, groups of objects. Quite often, you may happen to select an object in a scene and then explicably not be able to select any other objects, or perhaps not even be able to deselect the selected object. Don't panic. Check whether the little padlock icon highlighted here is active. That blocks the selection. You most likely press the spacebar by accident, which is precisely the shortcut used to activate this option. This was done on purpose to introduce the next topic, groups of objects. Okay, let's thin out the scene a little bit and just examine the group of objects in question, isolating it from the rest of the scene as we saw in the previous lesson. If we then want exit isolation mode, we just click on the highlight button. So, a group is a collection of objects, as in this case, where we have several components grouped into a single block. To get a better understanding, go to the Group menu and click on Ungroup. This group is taken apart and the objects are separated permanently. Now we can select the objects individually and modify them if necessary. If we want to, we can move the objects separately. For the record, the tool of positioning and moving will be covered in depth in the next lesson. So, intuitively, you may gather that to group two different objects, you just need to return to the Group menu and you click on the group once again. The system will ask you to give a name to the group being created. This way, the group can once again be selected as a single object. I must add that you don't have to ungroup and recreate a group each time you need to modify the object within it. In fact, the Open button allows us to temporarily open the group and select and modify the object without any problems. Once the changes have been made, just click on the pink frame you can see highlighted on the screen, return to the Group menu and select Close to close the group. You can also add new objects to an existing group. So let's create a box. And with the box selected, return to the Group menu and select Attach. then click on the chair. If instead we want to separate an object from the group, the procedure is the following. Keep the group selected, return to the group menu, and open it by clicking Open. Select the object to separate, then go back to the group menu and click on Detach. To finish off this lesson, let's talk about layers. Now, for all of you who have used AutoCAD, you'll find it all familiar. For everyone else, you'll see that this tool is quick and intuitive to learn, but above all, very useful. I've prepared some basic objects on a plane. You'll see some new objects among them, a cone, a tube, a torus, and all these objects can be found among the standard primitives in 3ds Max. Following the advice given in the previous lesson, try to create some other objects. Having done that, you'll see that all the objects have been given a name so that they can be better recognized within the Layers panel. Now, open the panel by clicking on the icon shown here in the toolbar. In the dialog box that opens, you'll see a little bar of icons at the top of the window. Just ignore it for now and concentrate on the area directly below it. Here we find the default layer 0, into which the system has placed all the objects created in the scene. If we click on the various flags of each individual object beneath the column Hide, the objects are hidden individually, while if we click on the layer flag, the layer and all its contents are hidden. The same thing goes for Freeze, which freezes the layer and its contents. We won't worry about the remaining 3 columns as they are not subject of this course. Instead, let's move on to examine the icon bar at the top. The first icon is used to create a new layer. We can change its name by clicking on it. The tick that appears next to the layer name shows that the layer is active. And all new objects created will be placed in the layer that's currently active. By opening layer 0, which contains some elements, and selecting some of them by clicking the icon shown, you can move them to a new active layer. Prova 1. First select the layer and then click on the second icon shown. If you want to move objects from one layer to another much faster, you can select them from the scene. Return to the Layers panel and create a new layer. The selected objects will be automatically transferred to the layer. You can choose whichever method you like the most. In large scenes with layers full of objects, it could be hard to identify which layer an object belongs to. For this reason, we can select the unknown object and click on the button shown. The layer it belongs to will also be selected immediately. If we want to delete a layer, we need to empty it first, by deleting or removing all the objects it contains. Select the layer to be deleted and make sure that it isn't active. If it is, tick another layer. Finally, click on the red X that now become active. To finish off this third lesson, let's bring our attention on the 2 last icons on the right. If we click on the first one, all the layers contained in the panel and their relative objects will be hidden. If we click on the second one, they will be frozen. That's all for this lesson. See you next time. Bye.